Next up, we have Movie Spotlight, where we discuss some of the latest releases on streaming services or at the Korean box office. Our guests for this week are film critics Jason Bechervaise and Darcy Paquet. Hi, gentlemen.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Hello.
Okay. Local releases are now coming thick and fast, and today we have a sequel to Park Hoon-jung's The Witch, that's Manya in Korean, The Witch Part 2, The Other One. That's my movie voice. Jason, tell us briefly what the film's about and how it's related to the original.
Yeah, it has a rather convoluted title. The first film is called The Witch Part 1, The Subversion. This was released back in 2018. Actually, I remember talking about it on this show. It doesn't feel all that long ago. It wasn't really warmly embraced by local critics, but it did have some supporters, particularly internationally, and it performed well at the box office, selling just over 3 million tickets. It also launched Kim Da-mi's now very successful acting career, and it was financed and distributed by Warner Brothers Korea. It did well overseas. Its action scenes in particular attracted notice. The film was directed and written by Park Hoon-jung. I guess one of his most famous films is New World or Shin Si-a, also made VIP, and the Netflix movie Night in Paradise. Now, in the first film, a young high school student called Jae-yoon, played by Kim Da-mi, she's basically used as a medical experiment, becoming this formidable assassin or murder weapon, and she escapes the lab and is then raised by the owner of a farm and his wife, and 10 years later her past essentially comes to haunt her. Now, in the second film, also written and directed by Park Hoon-jung, it follows Jae-yoon's now twin sister, played by Shin Shi-a, another creation of the co-named Witch project that turns these people into supervillains. Now, she escapes the lab located in Jeju and is picked up by a group of thugs, and they don't know what she's made of, but they soon find out. And also taken by the men is a young woman played by Park Eun-bin, and the pair end up helping each other along with the younger brother of the woman, and essentially they are hunted by various teams of assassins. That's all you really need to know. Also stars Seo Eun-soo, Jingu, Song Yoo-bin, Lee Jong-sok, along with a number of others, including some names from the original film. So Jo Min-soo and Kim Da-mi appears as kind of a cameo.
I see. Why am I thinking of Jason Bourne?
Well, another series.
Right? Yeah. It appears it's much of the same in the second installment, isn't it?
Right. I mean, the film, I think it preserves kind of the key selling point of the original, which is that you have this character who appears to be this somewhat vulnerable young woman who people don't initially take very seriously, and yet she has this kind of incredible power. And the way that it's portrayed on screen visually, it's a very effects heavy film. The way that she's able to take these men and throw them through roofs and through walls and off into the distance, it doesn't look very realistic, but I think that to a certain extent we're used to that from the Marvel films, and the way that it's staged is interesting, I think, because it contrasts, this very kind of waif-like, very vulnerable image with these sudden moments where she exerts her power. And so in that sense, that was one thing that I think helped to launch the career of Kim Da-mi in the original film, just because it's an interesting kind of character and an interesting look, and this contrast between her image and this power that she has. And in this film too, I think that the casting emphasizes this. This new actress, she has that kind of a very innocent look about her, but the film plays with that. And there are times when the film feels a bit like a Marvel movie, particularly towards the end, where you have this big face-off between a number of, different people who've come out of this program and who have developed these essentially superpowers. But yeah, I think if you like the first film, then the film offers a similar type of pleasures, I guess.
Now, that new actress, they cast an unknown for the lead as well. Her name is Shin Shi-a, right?
Yeah.
What do you make of her performance? Will she the repeat of the success that Kim Da-mi had, who was also selected through auditions and went ahead and win the Best New Actress and the Blue Dragon Award?
Yeah, that's a significant award because if you do you win that, it invariably means that you get a lot of fairly big roles and fairly big projects, she's good. Her characters. There's certainly some similarities, but I think she also, and to her credit, she differentiates herself from Kim Da-mi. I think people assume that she went through an audition process. There were 1,400 people who applied.
Wow.
It's not just Kim Da-mi, but there have been other actresses over the years that have got roles through auditions and then become these big stars. And so, she's good. There's some really interesting scenes. There are times when she's quite eccentric, especially there's this quite interesting scene in a supermarket where she's kind of trying to eat everything because she's so hungry and she's trying all these new snacks. And then you see her as well kind of becoming incredibly strong and formidable. There's definitely range there, and I think she does make an impact. Will we see her, in award ceremonies, next year or later on in the year? I don't know. It's possible.
Mm-hmm. Overall thoughts on this film, Darcy?
I think parts of it work well and other parts of it don't work quite as well. There is a lot of humor in the film, but I think a lot of the humor seemed to be falling flat, at least in the theater where I was sitting. Like, there wasn't a big response from viewers there. And I don't think it's this director's strengths. He's a director who works with really dark material, and some people accuse him of being a little bit cold in terms of his outlook.
Yeah.
And so I think that, the humor doesn't really work as well, but there are other scenes that do work well. Generally, I think it's been well received on the whole by audience members. Again, there's a mix of opinions, but I think we'll definitely be seeing a third film before too long.
I see. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I'm not a big fan of the first film, so I didn't hate the film. I didn't love it either. I think visually it's less interesting for me. It's so CGI heavy, whereas the last film I haven't seen it since it was released, but I don't recall it being so kind of Marvel, kind of superpowers. It reminded me of Adahan as well, which is a Yu Sung-won film. Right. It's fine. I agree with Darcy. The humor kind of falls a bit flat. So tonally, I'm not sure it really works. And there are too many characters. Way too many characters. It's not convoluted though. The plot is pretty simple, but there are just so many characters, and it can be difficult to kind of make an impression when you've got so many people in the room. But yeah, it's okay.
Okay, I see. Now to a Hollywood film, and we have a latest Pixar animation, Lightyear, or Buzz Lightyear in Korean. It's a spin-off of a Toy Story series that launched a new era of animation films in the 1990s, the first fully computer-animated feature. Darcy, I take it this new film hones in on the famous character, Buzz Lightyear, from the Toy Story films, right?
Yeah, at the very beginning of the film, there's a message that says that, Andy, the main character from the Toy Story films, was a big fan of Buzz Lightyear because he had seen this particular movie. And so they say, this is that movie. And so, in one sense, it's kind of separate from the Toy Story stories because we don't have the same characters except for Buzz Lightyear, and it's set kind of, in space, in this imaginary space. But it fits within the backstory in that way. And so Buzz this time is voiced by Chris Evans. He's a space ranger who is tasked with kind of checking out, faraway planets that may have life. And so there's a planet that they've detected life on, and so he goes to check it out. And it turns out to be more hostile than he's expecting. In the course of trying to make his getaway from the planet, he crashes the ship basically, and so they're stuck on this planet. And, it's a big group of people. There's, this whole team of scientists and other soldiers and everything. And everybody's trapped on this planet. And so he feels really guilty about this. And so he tries to, develop some kind of hyperspeed capabilities so that, if he's successful in testing this thing, then he'll be able to get back home. But it doesn't go easily. It doesn't go well.
I see. Given that the film is set in a different universe and plays with time as well, right?
Yeah, it does.
Does that make reference to other science fiction films?
It sure does. For those who are familiar with the Star Trek reboot, where you have this kind of this time warp. So Buzz Lightyear, basically, he tries to develop this technology with the help of his team, and he goes on these test flights, right? So to experiment, and so he goes so fast that by the time he gets back to the planet, 4 years have passed. But he's tenacious, so he's like, well, it hasn't worked, so he needs to do it again. And before he knows it, his best friend has got married and had a child, and then sadly dies. And then you've got basically a new team of commanders who have other ideas. So it's making reference to science fiction films, to Star Wars, and then of course you've got the Toy Story kind of franchise as well. Does it really work? I don't know. I think Pixar have just raised the bar so high that, they've made these classics, Toy Story, unbelievably good, the fun films for adults, also for the kids, The Incredibles. There's a whole string of just stupendous films, and the artistry that goes into them as well. But this film just felt, it felt like it was a movie made for Disney Plus. That's the problem, and yet it got a theatrical release. And obviously it's Disney's and Pixar's beloved franchise. They're going to pump a lot of money into it, and it'll do well. But I have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed. I got to see it early, actually, so I thought. So I went in with these really high expectations. Normally, when there is an early screening, it generally, not always, but generally means it's decent. But I was actually. This is a bit of a snooze, and a bit disappointing.
Then, what do you think? Should I go see it? With my eyesight failing, in other words, is it the movie for young and the old as well?
Yes and no. I mean, the sci-fi references. I've got an 8-year-old. He won't get he won't catch those. But and he does like Toy Story, so yeah, he'll like it. I think older adults. I think the response has been divisive. There have been critics who have really liked it, and critics have been definitely lukewarm. So you may go in and absolutely love it, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Maybe I'm young at heart.
I would say particularly if you are fans of the original Toy Story films, you shouldn't go in expecting something that's very similar to that, because the Toy Story films are very emotional. And they have these kind of different dimensions to it, because, you have the world of the toys and you have the world of the adults, and you're kind of getting those multiple perspectives within those stories. And this one's very flat. It's just, imaginary or, faraway space setting, and very simple story. He's trying to escape the planet, and they do as much as they can to keep it interesting along the way. But for me, it just felt very one-dimensional.
Yeah, and it's very repetitive. I mean, it just goes on repeat for the first 30 minutes of the movie.
No, I see. Okay.
And then after a while, you're like, okay, wake me up when this is over.
But Jason was saying this film is being released in cinemas. It's not going straight to Disney Plus or like other films, like The Turning Red, which is May's 새빨간 비밀 in Korean. Are we, though, finally seeing a shift back towards theatrical releases in movies?
I think we are, actually. This comes at a time when Top Gun has performed exceptionally well in North America, not just North America, but in other territories too. Just 6 months ago, studios were reluctant to release films, and so many titles were being delayed, including Top Gun. And Disney dumped a few of their titles on Disney Plus, or were releasing them on Disney Plus and in cinemas at the same time, such as Black Widow, Dune as well, which is a Warner Brothers film. But I think now there is a consensus, I think, that we're going to see around a 45-day window between a release in theaters and release online. Recently, Apple announced a deal to finance a Formula One film, and that's going to have a big theatrical release, and then it will go on their streaming service 30 or perhaps even as long as 60 days afterwards. So, yeah, I think we're seeing compromises being made.
Okay. Final thoughts, Darcy?
Yeah, the pendulum is swinging back. I think a year ago, people were saying that people are going to stay home and watch Netflix forever and they'd never go back to the theater. And in Korea, we have a local movie that sold 10 million tickets. People said that would never happen again.
The Roundup.
A lot of shares in Netflix and other OTT platforms are slowing down or taking a dive. So for the moment, at least, the momentum seems to be shifting more towards theatrical.
I see.
Yay! As someone who's been going to the theatre every week for the last 2 years.
Oh, finally, it's a long time coming, though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, those are the two movies that we talked about. I think I'm interested in both of them. Thanks, gentlemen, for the previews.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.